Hey everyone, a little bit ago I did a statistical machine learning project on 7 Wonders Duel where I predicted the winner from the card types that they chose. So I'll just read my work and go into further depth and maybe add some words as I go along. But starting in, this document describes a machine learning task to predict a winner using card types chosen in a playthrough of a two-player board game 7 Wonders Duel. 82 features from matches on BoardGameArena.com were reduced to 36 features dealing with the card types. 4 feature selection methods found the most important features to create the right model with non-test data. A logistic regression was chosen based on the accuracy and interpretability. This process was repeated 4 more times with different variations of the game. And then 5 logistic regressions predicted wins with a greater than 71.4% accuracy on non-test data and greater than 71% accuracy on test data. The stronger card types had higher coefficients in their logistic regression equations. This process can be used for future games, including serious games, to teach students various subjects, including military concepts. All right, so the introduction. Some studies indicate that serious games teach complex concepts in a more effective way than a traditional classroom. Now, um, I'll skip through. You don't need to know too much about this. This is just we're working on a card game to teach airspace, cyberspace, and how different domains of warfare work together at my school. And it's important for serious games to be both engaging and educational. So, engagement keeps a student interested in exploring a game. Game balance supports engagement. If one card type, such as air, is stronger than the others, then the air would be played more than other cards, which could hurt the balance of the game. Conversely, if cyber cards are useless, then they will be played less, having that same balance issue. Again, this is that game we call it BSN, Battle Space Next, to kind of help a student learn why, if they're very much into air power and air combat, they can learn why the ground forces are useful, or understand why cyber forces are useful. It's actually a pretty fun game. But to test if one card type is too powerful or too weak, a study will be conducted using a similar game, 7 Wonders Duel, which uses 7 different types of cards, each with their own way they support one or more different winning strategies. So let's compare some of their game mechanisms. You see the cards from one game to the other. So BSN has 2 different victory conditions: defeating the opponent's command center and or exhausting all the cards in their deck. 7 Wonders Duel has 3 ways to win. You got science. You have 6 unique symbols found on green cards. Military by 9 more shields granted by red cards than the opponent's shields. Or culture with more points at game end after the last card is chosen. So Battle Space Next is highly customizable with various scenarios, each with assortment of rule sets and additional win conditions. Similarly, 7 Wonders Duel can simulate scenarios with the 2 expansions. You have Pantheon, you have Agora, and then you have the combination of Agora and Pantheon. Now, Pantheon is going to add a new card type. Agora adds 2 new card types and a 4th win condition. So that simulates the way that this card game for the military, Battle Space Next, can teach somebody how to move ahead and learn new different types of scenarios, just adding expansions. So options for victory, these expansions make up the 4 scenarios: Standard, Pantheon, Agora, and Both, all referred to throughout the paper. It is likely the case that no academic journal has ever been published regarding using 7 Wonders Duel as a subject of machine learning. Still hasn't. I haven't published anything, but this is something I had in the works. It is a recently published game of this decade. Given its similarity to Battlespace Next, finding valuable predictions in 7 Wonders Duel could yield dividends for other serious games. So the data set is comprised of 36 features taken from a collection of 82 different features. 36 retained features relate to cards rather than features like total turns, total points, symbols, total shields, player rank, and ELO. So ELO. So Agora white slash black and Pantheon divinities are denoted by their expansion in the front. So I said Agora or Pantheon in the front if it's a expansion specific card. Each feature ending in a 1 corresponds to the observed player, and ending in a 2 would be the opponent. And a different, the DIFF at the end of a variable being the difference between each. Example, gray diff is equal to gray 1 subtracted by gray 2. Okay, so here are all the different features that we looked at. We got yellow diff, yellow 2, yellow 1, and hopefully that all makes sense. Yeah, like green diff is how you have 5 green, your opponent has 2 green, green diff is equal to 3. In that scenario, you had 5 green, so green 1 would be 5, green 2 would be, whatever it was, right? So whatever your opponent has. There are also linking symbol chains when you're building. Added that into account, and yeah, so we'll just step right in. So the machine learning task. So this machine learning task is a classification problem. Did they win or lose? We have an observed player and we have their opponent. So this machine learning task is a classification problem attempting to classify each match as a win or a loss for the observed player. The problem can be described as supervised learning, and a ridge and lasso are typically used for supervised learning with access to target variable win to prevent overfitting by reducing the coefficients. So our hypothesis is for predictions for the strongest cards were the yellow cards in the data, especially in the standard game, as our prediction. And green cards in the Pantheon expansion, maybe white cards in the Agora, and both combinations would be that white cards would be the strongest. Okay, so another hypothesis was that divinity cards introduced in the Pantheon expansion would be very powerful. White cards and black cards introduced in the Agora expansion may be overpowered. Non-test data from March 2022 data of 10,000 observations showed an accuracy of 72.9% and as high as 77% in some scenarios when predicting a win using only the Agora expansion. Of around 1,192 different games were just the Agora games. Now, comparing the same models to test data from May of 2023, I had 7,000 observations. They predicted a win correctly 71% of the time and 75% at the highest accuracy, also that Agora model. So red and green cards turned out to be very powerful. This study provides educators with the results and methods to help keep games balanced and engaging. Right, so you want to make a good game, you want to make sure you have good balance. This is an idea. You could create different models using machine learning to predict who will win, and then check out the parameters on that model, or what it spits out. If you have a if you have a logistic regression that you spit out with it, you can check those coefficients and see, oh, I see red cards is a very high coefficient. Maybe red cards are overpowered. We can take a look at that. All right, so the structure. This document is going to contain 6 sections. This introduction, overview of similar related work, methodology, results, and conclusion. And yeah, we'll just breeze through the related work. You can look at it right here, but I'm not going to go too much into it. Right, and now we'll go into our methodology. So this paper demonstrates the use of statistical learning methods to predict a winner of a match. Analyzing the prediction model could be evidence showing a card type to be overpowered or broken based on several factors, including its overuse leading to a win. A logistic regression was most appropriate since analyzing the coefficients of a logistic regression could provide evidence for an overpowered card type. Expectations. The purpose of this study is to check the strength of each card type. Doing so would limit the allowable features to those based around the card types, and thus would constrain the accuracy of a prediction model. However, a model using forward feature selection to pick 10 of all 82 features, I just took all 82 rather than the 36 that they shifted it down to. The reason why we shifted it down to only 36 was we wanted to look at card colors mainly. But if you look at just all 82 features, we have some that are glaring, like this shows that somebody is going to win. So here's what they picked. Points difference. yeah, whoever has more points is going to win. Turns difference, whoever has more turns is going to win. Shields difference, if somebody had 9 or 10 shields more than the opponent, then they automatically won. So that was a very high predictor if that ever happened. Symbols difference, so if they had 6 more symbols than the opponent, yeah, they already won right there. Agora white difference, Wonders difference, Pantheon's divinity difference, Agora black difference, Chains 1 for some reason, and Brown's difference. So the first 5 features, they estimated 77% of the accuracy. Add more features and then it increases the accuracy of it. So you have a more powerful model if you include more features in your predictions. But if you just tell the model, here are the points, here are the turns difference, here are the shields, symbols, could you guess who won? Yeah, they could get it at 77% accuracy. For those first 5 features, you'll notice they directly correlated to win conditions. You have shields difference, the military win, symbols difference, the science win, and points difference, the the culture win, and I'll say the Agora white difference. White cards specifically help with that political win, the additional Agora win that is added with that scenario. Now, so these should be considered cheating when being used to predict a win. If you're grading this model, you should say, "Hey, hold on, you shouldn't be allowed to use the how many points they have at the end of the game to predict if they're a winner. You should use the actual how many blue cards did they get, how many green cards did they get, and then try to predict a win from that." But yet they never broke an 80% accuracy, so it's not going to be a perfect model. You're not expecting it to break 80% accuracy, even with the cheater coefficients. It didn't go above 80%. So we're going to constrain ours to 36 non-cheater ones. Thus, having greater than 80% accuracy using 36 less direct features would not be expected. Okay, so now we're caging it. If we can get to 80%, that'd be amazing. All right, so here are different pair plots. We have yellows are, or oranges are wins, and then blues are a loss for our observed player. And as you increase in the amount of turns that they have and increase in the amount of points that they have, they win more often. Same thing here with shields and symbols. So you have the science and the military victories. It would appear that as they increase in the amount of symbols that they have, so they have 5 or more symbols than the opponent, then they're going to be winning that game. All right. Okay, and then yeah, just as you'd expect. So data collection details. The collection process involved recording individual match information from the Seven Wonders Duel implemented on Board Game Arena, resulting in 5,000 observations. 10 matches were observed from every 5th player with from rank 3 on the website to rank 498, and then an additional 42 matches from players outside of the top 500 were recorded. They just filler observations. These reached 5,000 observations. These fillers were to fill up any gaps. Sometimes people would concede too early in the game or things like that. And anyway, so the 5,000 observations were then mirrored, flipping the player focus. So instead of looking at the observed player being the observed player, we flip it, and now the observed player is the opponent. Former observed players is now the new opponent. And so you flip it around. So the 5,000 observations were mirrored. We got that. We have 10,000 observations now. Really just 5,000 observations, but it helps with the math to do that mirroring. And now we've got 10,000 matches that we're looking at. And the bars are highlighted by their color of card, which generally supports that method to win. So figure 8, you can see the conglomeration of how many different games we had with divided into their different categories. Mainly a lot of standard games. We had 12% just Agora, but a good chunk of them were using both expansions. Very few used Pantheon, and that's just because looking at top 5,000 players, not a lot of them played just pure Pantheon games. All right, so figure 7 through 11 shows each victory condition was met in the 10,000 matches. So yeah, we have that, and I show figure 7. Looks like I needed to update that one. Whoops. Yeah, figure 9. Boom. Through 11. Okay. So win types, all data. we have the ways that they won. So with all data, civilian, then science, then military, then political win. This is different than the scenario used. These are scenarios used. Here was how the games actually finished. Most of them finished in a civilian victory of 10,000 games. A good chunk of them were science, and then less so military, and then a lot of them were political still. All right, and then we have here's kind of reminding you how we picked the players, going through every fifth, starting from the third, and then here's frequency of ways to win, the win types. So we got civilian, then science, then military, and then no political victory, obviously with the standard game, but a lot more science. If we're looking at just the Pantheon, ways to win, Pantheon increases science by a ton, and then we have the Agora increases political by a ton, but still civilian victories are happening. And then when you play with both expansions, political also still remains very high. In fact, gets even closer to the civilian victory. All right, maybe there's a god in the Pantheon expansion that's helping those political victories. But anyways, going back to the model fitting details, the feature selection stage used methods for forward stepwise selection, backwards elimination selection, L2 feature selection, ridge selection, L1 feature selection. Yeah, you got all these different feature selections, blah, blah, blah. But basically it's forward, ridge, L1, and backwards elimination. Backwards elimination didn't actually prove to do very good. There's going to be a lot of technical stuff in here, so I'll skip through it. But yeah, you all can kind of get the gist of it. So an estimate of the accuracy of each method was found using a logistic regression. And here's some different things that we did with that, but ultimately going through LDA, QDA, and logistic, we chose a logistic. Using the same process, logistic regression equations would be created using only observations of 4 different scenarios. Okay, a decision tree would also be fit of a depth of 3 to support analysis of those coefficients. And the decision tree thing was kind of fun, but wasn't super accurate ever. All right, the model evaluation details and analysis strategy. So we're going to look at the accuracy. That's just total accuracy, which is going to be equal to balanced accuracy since our classes are the same. We mirrored the data. Recall, and it's only a 2-player game. So recall, precision, F1 score were all looked at, and then they'd be recorded as non-test results using a random train val split of train 50%, stratified across the class of win. So in our we had training data, and then we have test data, or training data we'll call the non-test data. And in that non-test data, 50% of them are wins, 50% are losses. And that's why we don't have to use balanced accuracy. We can just use accuracy because it's inherently balanced. If we, and then we just took 50% of the data and made sure that that chunk of half had half of them being wins, half of them being losses. And then the rest of the data we would be have the same amount for our non-test. So we split up our non-test into a training and a validation, and we made sure that each set had equal amounts of wins and losses. That's how I should say it. So the results would be evaluated by accuracy, and so we train on this training set of data in our non-test set of 10,000 matches, and then we work our way up, and then we compare to the validation set. And then the results would be evaluated by accuracy, which also happens to be balanced accuracy due to the balanced classes. Evidence for overpowered features could be found based on the magnitude of coefficients and the accuracy of models on test data. For example, in extreme cases, if a model had the highest coefficient as double that of the second highest coefficient, then that feature may be overpowered. If that model's accuracy was also higher than 95%, then that would be considered strong evidence for an overpowered feature. Moving on to the results and discussion. So feature selection using the 4 methods described in the methodology chose the features as shown in table 3. So forward selection chose these ones. Here we go. Tokens difference for some reason. red difference, green difference, agora white, blue difference, agora black difference, pantheon divinities, yellow difference, purple difference, and gray 2. All right, and then using backwards elimination, it had these ones that it included. It just eliminated a ton of stuff, and then ridge and lasso limited it to just about 10 things that it eliminated each. So the logistic regression was fit for each of these features. So he took those features and fit a logistic regression saying only look at these features, get as close as you can to correct. And the logistic regression was fit, and below is the output of those methods, including a confusion matrix, which and precision, recall, F1 scores, and accuracy using threshold of 50%. So what all that means is you can see now the precision, recall, F1 score, and accuracy for each of those different the features chosen for these logistic regressions. And again, those features are taken up top, so we can just look at one of them. Let's look at just the lasso. Green difference, red difference, blue difference were the top ones that it thought were important in the feature selection stage. We fit a logistic regression using just those 10, and then it spit out an accuracy of 73%. Precision and recall are different ways to measure the accuracy. One being precision, how many of it, it deals with false negatives and false positives. So precision wants you to be precise and not have any false negatives. I think that's right how I'm saying it. Yeah. So you don't want, if you pick something and say you won, then it actually did win if it's very precise. And then a high recall is you don't want to miss any of them that did win. So if you say you won and you want to have a high recall, then it's okay if they didn't actually win, just as long as there wasn't a win that you didn't pick. So you got all the wins, and maybe you also added some losses in there that you called wins. That would be a high recall. The reverse would be the precision. Okay, so speaking of false negatives, false positives, here's a confusion matrix, and that shows. So yellow is high numbers, and purple's low numbers. So a 0 is the observed player lost, and a 1 is the observed player won. And for the most part, they predicted correctly using the forward feature selection, and correctly for if they won, they won, and if they lost, they lost. There were some cases, actually quite a bit of them. 601 times the player lost when we predicted that they won, or the 768 times the player won when actually we predicted that they lost. So interesting to note there. And then using the same thing for the backward feature selection, not as accurate, higher numbers in the failed categories. And then what you really want is these two numbers being very high. So logistic regression also wasn't that great. Or the using the ridge feature selection and also the lasso feature selection was actually pretty good. I think that we ended up going with lasso or forward feature selection for all of them. All right, so then and here's more data on each of them for the rock curves, showing that forward feature selection ended up being about 80%. Was area under the curve. So you take this curve of, if you want to move the threshold around of having, all right, we want to move it down here, so we want either less false negatives or less false positives, moving it back and forth. The best area under the curve that we had was 80%, or 80 area under the curve. 80% of this entire graph, I guess. A perfect world, a perfect model would have a line that goes straight up and over, and that would be 0.999 or something like that. Like it'd always guess it correctly. All right, so no matter how you change the dial of threshold, you change. Right now, we put it at 50% though, so we were okay with some false negatives, just like we were okay with some false positives equally. We weren't focused on one or the other. All right, so changes in threshold affected the trade space between precision and recall as expected, but it would hurt accuracy most of the time. The two most accurate feature selection methods use the same 9 features. Agora white, red difference, green difference, purple difference, Agora black, Pantheon, blue difference, yellow difference, and token difference. And then attempting to find significantly greater accuracy using, these were different methods that we used, but ultimately, logistic regression worked the best. So also fit some decision trees, and I'll zoom into them in the very end, but this is basically a tree that says, hey, if the green difference is less than 3 or negative 3, okay, then we'll move over here. And if it's greater than it, then we'll move over here. And so here we're looking at the Agora white, and then ultimately we see if it's classified as a loss or a win based on where it's at in the tree. So that can help like a player of the game look and say, okay, maybe I want to keep my green high and my white cards high, things like that. So that's a decision tree that is used after 10,000 observations. Anyways, yeah, moving left on the tree indicates having the specified partitions such as green difference, negative, less than negative 3.5. A decision tree could help a player of the game to target thresholds. One threshold shown in the tree above would have a green difference of greater than 5.5, likely winning with a science victory. Another shown above is having a red difference of greater than 3.5, with a green difference of greater than 3.5. Significantly more red cards than the opponent threatens a military victory. So there were limited observations for each expansion, important to note, amongst the non-test data. So in the non-test data, those 10,000 observations, Standard had 6,098 games. Pantheon only had 450 games. Agora only had 1,192 games. Expansions of both had 2,260 games. And these are all even numbers because remember we mirrored them. And then it makes up the test data, which we had 7,000 games taken from 2023. And this is the standard games of 3,378 games. Pantheon, only 776 games. Agora, only 484. And both expansions pretty close, 2,362 as last time. Differences, so they were about the same, but there are definitely some stark differences. So you can see that I should have made like a graph to show the differences. Agora only was like 1,100, okay? And then now the top 500 players are playing a little bit more Pantheon, a little bit less Agoric only, and both expansions about the same. And but you have to realize this is actually this is only 7,000 games versus 10,000 games. So yeah, it's a crazy amount more with Pantheon, and then expectedly less because you have only 7,000 games versus 10,000 games with less for Agora. So it would have been interesting to show a percentage of them, but I never did. All right, so anyways, Table 7 shows the results for each scenario on non-test data compared with the 2023 test set highlighted in blue, with results higher than the non-test data marked with a capital or G exclamation, and less than 2% of the non-test data marked with ML for much less. All right, so you can just see how I did that there. Let's just look at the standard. So what is this saying here? This is saying that we draw a line, remember like a graphing calculator, drawing a line out, and we're saying that if you are, I guess within that line, you are considered a win, and if you're outside of it, you're considered a loss. Or maybe if you reach above that line, then you're considered a win. So green difference was set at 0.45, and red difference set at 0.48. Purple difference is set at 0.42. Blue difference 0.29. Yellow difference 0.23. Tokens difference and brown difference even less than that. All this is saying is that in the dimension of green, you want it very high. And the dimension of red in that line going through all these dimensions, you want red very high, um, uh, perhaps more so than green. Red would matter. And then purple 0.42, blue 0.29, and it goes lower as it goes. So that's just the standard game. Pantheon, the best one was using that feature selection model, and it actually only chose 5 Pantheon features to predict it correctly. You'll see it chose green difference, Pantheon difference, Pantheon divinity gods difference, the red difference, yellow difference, a little bit of gray difference, very, very low amount, and then the rest being Agora stuff, which wouldn't matter because we're only playing pure Pantheon. So what that's telling us is it really only had high accuracy when it picked the first 5. Any extra just was noise in the data that didn't really help it predict well. And so the things you should be focused on if you're playing the Pantheon expansion are having a lot of green cards, taking a lot of god cards, red cards being high, and yellow cards being even higher, and then a very small amount for gray. I wouldn't even worry about gray. So just look at those top 4 if you're playing with the Pantheon expansion. Similarly, Agora is saying just pure Agora, you want high amount of red cards chosen. You want a high amount of white cards chosen. You want to be able to get more tokens than the opponent, so taking tokens mattered a lot, and having more blue cards than the opponent mattered, having more black cards than the opponent mattered, having more purple cards mattered, having green cards less so. It didn't really matter that much. Yellow cards less so, brown cards less, gray cards even less. So really you want to have a lot of red and white if you're just playing the pure Agora. And then with both together, having Agora high, the white cards high, the red cards high, the black cards high. And also when you have both, even the green cards do matter. About as much as grabbing a bunch of god cards. You notice in the Agora, the god cards didn't take into account because that's not playing with any god cards. So the model just chose them. We put in all of the different attributes it could pick from, and then it picked the ones that were giving it. They would train on the non-test data, and then it would compare that model with the validation data and see what would be best. And Pantheon just said anything extra is just noise. You just really only care about yellow, red, and green and the god cards to win, which I actually really feel strongly about. I feel like you can discard a lot of those other cards and just focus on those top ones. So very cool, I think, being a pure Pantheon player myself, that it showed such a high correlation between what a real expert would play with and what the high predictions would be. All right, so now looking at all matches together. I don't know how useful this is because you're not going to be really playing with all matches, but generally playing Seven Wonders Duel, white cards are important, red cards are important, green cards are important, purple cards are important. And Pantheon cards are important. All right, so lastly, here's some different decision trees that we can look through, maybe at the end if I remember, but let's go to the conclusion. So we talked about the different models. We had decision trees, logistic, and then I even had different other models that were included. And they were various different iterations of 10 or less features. Didn't end up using the backwards elimination selection because that would just eliminate like 30 features. Or actually, it would include 30 features, and that was not very useful. Features chosen for models tested were those indicated by the top features from different picking techniques, including forward selection and lasso regression were used. Ridge and backwards weren't used, but ridge came close. All right, the logistic regression equations each had accuracies of greater than 71% on all test and non-test data. Here's some findings. Taking more red and green cards than the opponent was always a factor in each model to predict a win. No feature had... Is that true, actually? Let's look at the Agora. Yeah, the Agora actually did use science just a little bit. Okay, it did use those green cards a little bit. But yeah, so that's important to note there. We thought that the yellow difference would be important, but you can look at this table right here. The top card hypothesis, standard being yellow, and then the top three card types were actually green, red, and purple. I thought green would be important for Pantheon, green, yellow, and red being the 1, 2, and 3 top ones. Agora, I thought white would be important, red, white, and blue for Agora, and then both of them white, red, and black, and then all data together. Yeah, yellow is important in generally most games. Okay, so yeah, in closing summary, those were the card types that the machine learning models showed, and the final development of the 5 different logistic regressions with 10 or less features predicted accuracy of 71.4% accuracy on non-test data, and yeah, it greater than 71% on the test data for all models. It's expected that these models will continue to show around 71% accuracy with any future predictions. We go to 2024, they will probably be just as accurate. So no single card type proved to be overpowered, but evidence that was gained for those with the highest coefficients, that science and red cards. This methodology could be used for game balance in future games to include educational games produced as serious games. So anyways, thank you very much for watching this video, and yeah, I think we'll just end it there. And yeah, I said I'd zoom into one of these things, so there you go. Here's how a decision tree might look. All right. So thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.